basically, I just want to give you an insight into one of these particular cases, and we can talk further about other work of the committee, but just to give you an insight. I'm going to describe a fact pattern to you, and when you hear the fact pattern, you're going to say to yourself, okay, tell me the other side of the story. Give me the other perspective. And I'm telling you, there's no other perspective. So this is what happens. There's a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Sowers. They're dairy farmers in Maryland. They've been doing this for decades. They get into a little bit of a cash business. They're doing the weekend farmers market stuff, and so they have cash and they deposit cash into their bank. Federal law says that if you that a bank has a reporting requirement. If there's a $10,000 or higher deposit, the bank has an obligation to report that. Mr. and Mrs. Sowers come in with amounts in and around that. The bank says, hey, it's a big hassle when you come in with 10 grand. Can you come in with less than that? And this nice couple says, yeah, sure, we can handle that. That's against the law. That element of saying I'm going to structure my accounts or structure my deposits so as to avoid a reporting requirement is against the law. Now, the law itself was designed to go after Mr. White in Breaking Bad, a human trafficking operation, a mafia front group. The law was not designed to go after Mr. and Mrs. Sowers who were milking cows in rural Maryland and doing nothing else wrong. And yet the IRS comes in and seizes their assets. No notice, no phone call, no knock on the door. They seize their assets. So Mr. and Mrs. Sowers feel like, hey, I'm stuck in a Kafka novel here. I don't know what's going on. They can't get straight answers. And to make matters worse, the IRS refers it to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice really puts the hammer down on these people. The Department of Justice lawyer says to Mr. and Mrs. Sowers' lawyer, we may make this a criminal referral, not a civil case that it was at the beginning. We may refer this on a criminal basis. The lawyer writes back, says, why would you do that? The DOJ lawyer says, because your clients talked to the press. Now marinate in that for a second. The Department of Justice is jerking these people around because they're asserting their First Amendment right. That is abuse. That is, if it's systemic, that borders on tyranny. So what we're doing at the committee is we're going after that. So we had a hearing, we brought in the IRS commissioner, we invited him to tell us about their testimony, or about their approach on this. I told him, you're Inspector Javert in Les Mis. That's you. Nobody likes Inspector Javert, and it doesn't end well for Inspector Javert. So it was very interesting. He comes in, and I'll just give you a quick snapshot. He comes in and he gives us his testimony, which you could all write. You know exactly how this goes. Said, Mr. Commissioner, you know the testimony of these witnesses that are going to be coming right after you, Mr. and Mrs. Sowers, and a couple of these other cases. Would you, in light of what happened, would you like, on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service, to apologize to them? And he said, well, listen, I don't exactly know their stories. I said, you know their stories. And in light of those stories, would you like to apologize on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service? That second answer he gave me was a complete non-answer. But I learned, lower the wattage, and the third time's the charm. Commissioner, the Internal Revenue Service reached out and grabbed these people by the throat and choked them till they nearly died. Would you like to apologize today on the Internal Revenue Service, on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service? And he said, I'm really sorry this happened to anybody. Now, that and a couple bucks will get you a cup of coffee. I know that, but it's a disposition and it's an attitude that we're trying to push. So there's a lot of things that we can be doing and that we are doing on these different areas. Things on Medicare in particular, on the fraud side. Now, this is like a Seinfeld episode. It all comes together because it helps our committee develop some sort of goodwill and capacity to lead the rest of our conference on difficult things as it relates to tax reform. Because when tax reform comes, our committee is going to be in a position to go to our conference and say, here's what we got to do. And there's some difficult places we need to go. And in light of the work that we've done on these other areas, it's my hope and my expectation that the Oversight Subcommittee will not only be doing the work that we ought to be doing from an oversight point of view, but at a committee point of view, we will be acquiring goodwill on behalf of the rest of our conference and the American people. So it's a very interesting season. I thoroughly enjoy it. I think that there's a lot to do, and there's great opportunity all the way around. So with that, why don't I yield at the first time Jim Conzelman looked at his watch.
Very good. Thank you.